Warwick, we've just finished our conversation with Dr. Margie Worrell about her book that focuses on the courage gap. What stood out to you is if you had to pick one headline, right? What's one headline that you can pick of what Margie shared that will be beneficial to folks who watch and listen to Beyond the Crucible?
The thing that's fascinating to me, Gary, is the amount of overlap between what we do at Beyond the Crucible and the courage gap. To get beyond your worst day, you have to have courage. You have to have the courage to say, I'm not defined by this worst day. You've got to learn to reframe your story. As you mentioned in the podcast, it didn't happen to you, it happened for you. So really, I found a lot of overlap. Really, part of it is just admitting that we are all fearful. Sometimes fear appears in different ways. As Margie said, it can be the hard driving, micromanaging, overly confident boss that's really showing symptoms of insecurity and fear. So fear shows up in different ways, but just be honest about being fearful and make a decision that fear is not going to be the ruler. And really the key to getting out of that fear trap is to look at your life and legacy. What do I want my life to be about? What do I want in life? And let that, from our perspective, altruistic goal, that life of significance, be the lifeline, be the rope in the pit, if you will, that pulls you out of fear and saying, okay, I've got things I want to do. I want to help people. I want to lead a life of significance. I'm not going to be ruled by my fears. I'm going to, dwell in my innermost truths, whatever that means for you. I'm going to surround myself with fellow travelers that are going to encourage me. But I'm not going to just wallow in fear because there's too many things I want to do in life. There's a legacy I want to live of a life of significance of helping people. So there was really some important strands that came out of our discussion about what fear is, but how you can have practical tools to not be beholden to fear and just live in a world of fear. We all have days in which we're fearful as part of being human, but how do you get out of it? I think we really learned some very important tools from Margie on that.
Yeah, and she made a great point about fear can be both the cause of a crucible and it can be the crucible itself, right? It can be two difficult things in one. And she also made the point that fear creates a gap between thought and action. First note I took a lot of notes, folks. You can see it right here. The first note I took, fear creates a gap between thought and action. It takes courage to go through that gap. And that's the reason that we're talking about it here at Beyond the Crucible, right? Is that closing the courage gap is one way, a great way, is essential, I think this episode reveals, to overcoming your worst day and not letting that define you, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you made a point early on in the conversation, and we talk about this a lot on Beyond the Crucible. Most of our guests have found the most fearful step is the first step. And so when you know your why, you know the good in the world that you want to achieve, you know the life of significance, you know that vision. What's that one small baby step? That small baby step may be the hardest and the most fearful, but once you've accomplished that, you're typically a little less afraid of the next step. Margie shared growing up in rural Australia outside of Melbourne that she wanted a horse. Well, she got this tame horse when she was about 10. She was so scared she was almost nauseated just those early days of riding it. Well, after a year or two, it's like, I can handle this. I want this, as she coins it, this wild Brumby, this sort of fierce, savage horse. Well, she never would have wanted that day one, but because she, had ridden that tamer horse, she was ready for the next challenge. But I'm sure if we'd asked her, what was the toughest day for you? It would have been getting on that first tame horse, that first day, and overcoming my nausea and abject fear of that massive horse as a 10-year-old girl in Australia. So for, listeners, that first step in overcoming fear and having courage, that's huge. Just, whatever that small step is, forget about the whole big goal in that sense. Keep that in mind, but focus on what's one small step I can do today to overcome fear and take a small step of courage.
Right. And really, folks, the best way to hear the answer to that is to listen to the full episode. So we encourage you to listen to the episode with Margie and hear the great insights as she walks through her book.